everybody, this is Ashka, and today I wanted to talk about Godspousing. So, what is Godspousing? I put this off for about a year because this phenomenon is happening to me, and I wanted to wait for a while just to make sure that this really was happening, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, what is Godspousing? Well, a Godspouse is someone who is married to and devoted to, in one way or another, a specific deity. This deity can come from any background or pantheon, whether it be Norse god, Greek god, Hindu god, Egyptian god, or whatever. Typically, what happens is that a god reaches out to someone through their dreams or psychically, and at some point, the god proposes to said person, or the person proposes to the god, or there is a mutual agreement in marriage. Oftentimes, this deity may have been in communication or contact with the person for a long period of time already, and either the person is aware of that or they are not until the god reveals their name and who they really are. In that case, it's usually just a matter of timing or waiting for the person to be ready for such a reveal. This person may or may not already know about this god. There are cases where someone finds that they're in contact with a god and they need to research to find who this god is. Now, the Godspousing community came into more light several years ago when Marvel released a series of movies that involved the Norse god Loki. It became a subject of ridicule, though, because many people were then claiming that they were married to Loki or Thor or both. And I actually watched a YouTube video about it, but I totally forgot about it because I didn't really have an opinion on the matter, and I didn't feel like it's really my place to judge. I later realized I watched this because the same thing happened to me, and I was searching for answers. I'm like, wow, okay, this has been a thing that's been going on that I had no idea about, or I forgot about. So how does a god communicate with you? Well, as I said before, oftentimes a god will reach out to someone in their dreams. In my case, that is what happened. But my god spouse was not allowed to reveal to me who he was for quite some time, but for good reasons, and that was because I just wasn't ready. Instead, he would come in disguise. Our dreams were very intimate. Shortly before he revealed himself to me, I would wake up feeling very happy after dreaming about him, feeling like I was with somebody I knew for a long time, someone I was deeply in love with, and someone who loved me. I would also wake up with love songs stuck in my head that I actually had to look up because I either didn't realize they existed or I completely forgot they existed. So this was my god husband trying to send me a message. So the songs he sent me, funnily enough, were from New Kids on the Block from the 80s. And one was Step by Step, and the other one was You Got the Right Stuff. So I looked up these song lyrics. I'm like, I feel like I know these songs, but I don't know for sure if they exist. But I was actually surprised that they actually existed. They were from the 80s, and the last time I heard from them, I was just a little child. But gods can be very romantic. They are not tied to human ideas of masculinity or femininity. They don't play games. They aren't manipulative like a lot of people can be. When they love you, they're very open about it and expressive about it. They're also very patient and understanding. They will send you love songs into your mind or in your dreams or on the radio, like you keep hearing the same song over and over, for example. And for those who have more psychic abilities, they can talk to you directly, but for me, it always felt like a more of an intuition than anything. But in the beginning, I could hear him for a brief period of time, but I have OCD, so my intrusive thoughts were like getting in the way, so he had to cut back on direct communication because of that. But this is known as the God phone. I actually dreamt about this concept before I even heard about it. The God phone is an ability given to you at birth or later in life that lets you directly communicate with the gods or your god spouse. In my dream, I followed a lion up to a temple where all these people in robes were going to. And I asked them what was going on, and they said that the mother goddess was coming. And when I reached the temple, a woman with a lion's face and long black hair emerged from the shadows. She took my phone. I had my cell phone with me. She took my phone, and it burst into flames. And then she said that she blessed my marriage. And this was before Rahu showed up. So I didn't know what she was talking about. But anyway, that was the God phone, I believe. And the mother goddess was either goddess Pavarti in the Hindu belief system, or it could have been my godspouse's mother, who was said to be a lioness, which I learned later, which actually explains a lot about my godspouse. But over time, my godspouse was able to touch me, like physically, but it's sort of like a muscular spasm, but it feels like somebody's touching you at the same time. Like in the beginning, when I would do puja or worship, I could feel his hands running through my hair, or a physical presence sitting next to me. I also started to feel something touch my lips, which sort of felt like a small muscle spasm at the same time, but it also felt like I was being kissed. So I never had this experience before in my life, but now I feel it every day. Like he kisses me every day from time to time. And I can also feel him poking me. He can also push me, but not like hard, like and violently or anything like that. Like if I'm about to fall asleep and I need to take my medicine, he will poke me at first, and if I still don't get up, I get like this push, like it wakes me up. It's a push that startles me awake, and I'll get up and take my medicine. And that's just one of many examples of things that he does. So he's very helpful, and he actually looks out for me like that. So and there was also a time that I got hooked on morphine, because after I lost my father, it was really hard for me to sleep, and I was struggling with a lot of emotional pain. So I was trying to wean off of it, and I had some bad withdrawal. And that included having a terrible night terror one night. And I was calling out for Rahu, and I immediately woke up, and I could feel him rubbing my back. So it was really sweet. And I think sometimes people, when they get into these spirit relationships with a god or a spirit, that they may have some negative experiences like that, and they think it's the god or the spirit, but it's not doing that to you. So him rubbing my back and being very comforting was really reassuring to me that, hey, that he's not causing these bad dreams or anything. That's from morphine withdrawal. That's totally me. But anyway, so the meeting, when you first meet the god, when the time is right, the god will make their presence known. And in my case, it was shortly before my father passed away. My father had battled lung cancer for about 3 years, but his health started deteriorating rapidly when the chemo stopped working and the cancer had spread. When I went to see my dad, over time, it was pretty clear that he was getting worse and worse. And during that time, I started having these dreams about a large blue man who would show up, and we'd have these adventures, but we're also very intimate together. And like I said before, I would just wake up feeling very happy. Like I was with somebody that I knew for a very long time, and I loved him very much. But I would sit there and just wonder, who is this guy? But I also felt like he was trying to help me get through this very difficult time. And there had come a day where I was at my dad's house and I was trying to help him out, but he panicked. He was on a feeding tube at the time, and he couldn't get the food to go down. So he called the hospice nurse, which at the time I didn't understand why hospice was coming out. My dad kind of made it hard for me in my denial, because he was in denial too. So he was having hospice nurses coming out there. I'm like, why are hospice nurses coming out there? That's for people who are dying. He's like, oh, they're just helping me with my meds. He would say things like that. So that just made it harder for me to understand that he was dying. But anyway, when the hospice nurse, came in, she was able to calm him down, but she started talking to him like, do you feel like you're dying? It's okay. And trying to calm him. And he's like, no. And I was like in shock. She looked at me like my face was in shock. I'm like, oh my God, my dad is dying? And that's when it started clicking for me that, yeah, my dad was dying. And he was deteriorating every time I saw him. He was losing more and more weight. He was getting skinny when he used to be overweight. Hi, so this is future me. I forgot to put this in the video, but the day before I went over to my father's house to help him out, when my sister said he was needing some help, I had a dream that night about my godspouse, but I didn't know at the time who he was. And I was like at these shops, and I was really excited. I'm like, hey, look at these cool things. And he looked at me like he was very concerned. And he just nodded his head, but I could just see a look of concern on his face. And I remember that, and I was wondering, what is he so worried about? Like he's concerned about something, as if he was there for me, and we had just been intimate, and again, and in this dream, and but after that, we went looking around and stuff, and so the very next day, I saw my dad. He looked terrible, and he had that freak out, and that's when I realized that my father was dying. And that look of concern for my God spouse was in regards to my dad, because he knew it was going to happen. But he was also struggling to remember to take his meds. So I called my sister. She came over, said she would try to get his medication schedule straightened out and stay with him as long as she could, even if that meant moving in. And so I went home that night. I tried to go to bed, but I heard a loud sigh that startled me out of bed. I then called my sister, or I texted her and told her what I heard, and I told her that I'd help out and be there on the days that she worked, so most of the days of the week. Sorry. And I thought it was my dad that was sighing really loudly in my house, but I think it was really my God spouse trying to get me to realize just how dire this situation was and how much I was in denial. So my dad was only 62, so it's fairly young to die, and that was one of the reasons I was in denial about that. And the first night I came to stay the night, I felt like I was being rocked back and forth, like somebody was trying to rock me to sleep. And this is also the same place that burned down many years ago that we had to rebuild. And this house was pretty haunted, I would say. But there was also, even after we rebuilt the house, there were still some strange things that would happen now and then. So I got kind of used to the weirdness of the place. But I could feel that rocking, like for about a week or so. And I could also hear my dad talking to me, even though he'd be asleep. Or I'd be in another room. It's like I had to hear him talking, but he wasn't. And I told my sister, actually, I think she told me first. She's like, she was also experiencing this talking. She's like, I feel like I hear dad talking to me, even though he's like quite asleep, And I feel like maybe it was my dad leaving his body and not realizing it and talking to us about stuff. Or maybe he did realize it. I don't know. I feel like the land that this house is on has some sort of portal or something in it that enhances spiritual and paranormal activity, but that's just my opinion. But I asked her about the rocking sensation, and she said she wasn't experiencing that, just the weird talking thing. But not too long after that, after I'd stayed there a few days or a week, I don't remember, but I had a dream that this lion person came to me. It was a huge lion person, about 8 feet tall, but I could feel all this love from him. And I was so like enraptured in this love. It was very strong. And he kissed me on my lips and said he was Rahu. So yeah, that was very shocking to me. I was very surprised because I never expected that. But anyway, to talk about Rahu, to explain who Rahu is. He's a Hindu god, mostly known in Vedic astrology, but also written briefly about in some Buddhist texts. He's the god of solar eclipses and said to be the enemy of the sun and moon. That's why he briefly swallows them from time to time, which causes solar and lunar eclipses. He's also associated with Ketu, where Rahu is his head and Ketu is his body. And this stems from him being beheaded by Vishnu in the form of Mohini, where Rahu, whose original name was Svarbhanu, was the prince of the Dyadas, which is a race of Asuras. He was not entranced by the beautiful Mohini, who was trying to distract the Asuras and demons so that the Devas would get the elixir of because Vishnu at the time wanted the Devas to get to the elixir of immortality and not the Asuras and the demons and all that. But they had made a deal that because the Asuras had helped the Devas make this elixir, that they would get it too. But Vishnu was trying to give it to the Devas. So that's why Rahu disguised himself as a luminary Deva, like the sun or the moon, and drank the elixir. But the sun and moon gods pointed him out, and Vishnu beheaded him with his chakra. that he has on his finger. But Rahu had already drank the elixir and was therefore immortal. And later on in some texts, Rahu's body and head were destroyed and he was made god by either Vishnu or Brahma, or a god, sorry, depending on what you read. But he exists as a shape-shifting entity made of smoke, who inhabits the southern and north nodes of the moon. So they call him a shadow planet or imaginary planet or whatnot, because you can't see him in the sky because he has no body. Rahu is also the god of obsessions, illusions, trance, the occult, taboos, foreigners, unconscious desires, ambition, and working through previous life karma. He is also known as a demon god, and on the surface, sounds like a god one would fear, which many do. But as I've been married to him for about a year now, I've come to realize that he's really a misunderstood god. He might seem menacing on the surface. He's actually very loving and caring and romantic. Much of the Asuras are misunderstood, and Christians think of them as demons, but they're very much like humans. Some can be bad, some can be good. Some of them a mixture of positive and negative traits. They're just a different type of godlike beings is all. Whereas the Devas are said to be more like good and more focused on serving God, the Asuras are a little more self-serving. I guess is a simplistic way of putting it. They're doing what they want, doing whatever they want, more so than the Devas. So that being said, I was surprised. I was not expecting that. I was confused as to why he appeared as a lion, because I didn't really look, at pictures of Rahu before, but I did see a couple pictures, and he always just looked like a regular person in the pictures. Like sometimes he was blue, or sometimes he just looked like a regular person. But I did find depictions of him as a lion, or half lion and half snake. So that really helped me realize that I was really dealing with Rahu. Also, his mother, like I said, is said to be a lioness. Or his mother's name means lioness, and she was known as a lion demoness. We don't really know that much about her though, but anyway. She was said to have killed Hanuman, but I don't know if I believe that. But after my father passed away, Rahu was very comforting to me, and I could feel like his love permeate my entire being for a while. And it was just like my heart chakra awakening all over again, which, again, happened after I had my son. All these spiritual things in my life happened after I had him. And I was in a state of nirvana for about a month. And, as strange as that sounds, because it was right after my father passed away, I was also in a state of shock for about a month as well. So I was in this love bubble again. Even though I was still sad about losing my father. I was in the state of nirvana, so it was kind of a weird time. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel Rahu's immense love. It was wonderful. But after a while, one cannot exist in that state for very long, because we live in physical bodies and we're behind a veil of separation from the spiritual world. So reality set in, and I had to cope with the grief of losing my father. And it's been over a year, and I'm finally in a place where I don't want to cry every day, which is good. So I did make progress in getting better with the grief. So it does get better. For any of those who's struggling, it's frustrating. I realize that I have a hard time dealing with sadness, and I don't know why I'm sad a lot of the times. Even when losing my father, I'd be sad. I'm like, why am I so sad? I'm like, well, you probably because you lost your father. It was like two parts of my brain just weren't communicating properly. And after losing my father, I really got in touch with my emotions a lot better. And now I can understand and realize why I'm sad. As strange as that is, but it's mostly because of my childhood. I was beaten whenever I cried. So I wasn't allowed to display sadness and crying as a child. And that kind of made it difficult for me to express sadness and understand sadness. So, yeah, losing my father, letting those feelings out and connecting the dots and understanding where it come from really helped me get in touch with my feelings. But anyway, So it was Rahu that was rocking me at night to comfort me. I realized later, because he does that while I'm awake too. Like, well, I was awake then, but he does that physically to me. Like, I would just be sitting there, and suddenly I'm rocking side to side, you know, and I would be like kind of surprised. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And it happened in front of my sister, who noticed, but she didn't say anything about it. And I was at my uncle's funeral, and he did that there to comfort me. One of my uncles passed away shortly after my father, so it just makes things a little extra hard. He passed away from COVID. He didn't want to get vaccinated, I guess. Thought he would be fine, but unfortunately that was not the case. But yeah, I would be kind of startled at first and worried that somebody would see it and just think I'm being weird, but I got used to it after a while. But I don't know where I'd be if Rahu wasn't helping me get through these very hard times, and I appreciate it so much because it was very difficult. My father was my hero, and it was really hard to lose him. So why did Rahu have to wait for so long? Because I'm like pushing 40 right now. I'm like almost 40. And I realized later that he had to wait, because if he had come to me sooner, I would have been scared off. Before I became Hindu, I was still entrenched in some Christian ideology, or I would say Christian brainwashing. I grew up Baptist Christian, and the Christians have a bad habit of seeing spiritual encounters as evil or demonic, when most of the time they are not. If I had looked up Rahu sooner, before I knew about him, before I started practicing astrology, I would have thought I was being tricked by a demon and tried to get rid of him. It wouldn't have worked, because he's still here to look after our son. So he would still be around, and I would just be, spinning tires. But anyway, I also remember having dreams where I would be, with a man. He'd be wearing sunglasses, and I'm like, why don't you take your sunglasses off? And be like, well, you'd recognize me, and I'd get in trouble, or something like that. Or he'd have his face concealed, and he just couldn't show me who he was. Like, he said I'd recognize him, And there was also times that other entities would come, come out of nowhere and start berating. He's like, you're not supposed to be here, or blah, blah, blah. Like, he wasn't supposed to be there with me. So I think that was him looking back on it. So as far as offerings to go, God's spouses usually make offerings like anybody else who would worship a god. So as a Hindu, I was already familiar with that. I was a devotee of Lord Shiva for a while, and Shiva actually really did help me in my life when I needed it. And that was one of the things I liked about Hinduism. Besides, I agree with many of their other beliefs, like, reincarnation and things like that. There are many gods that can help you in your life, and they all have different roles and different functions and specialities. And to me, like Christianity, you just pray to God or Jesus, but God, the source, is very hands-off in my opinion. I've never gotten any help from praying just to God. So I don't really feel like it's going to do much help. But if you need specific help, praying to a specific God that specializes in that field would make more sense. Like, if you have like a negative or mischievous entity messing with you, you can pray for an angel like Michael. Can you come help me get rid of this weirdo who's bothering me? And he'll come and he'll help you, because he's done that to me too. Like I've said before, I've had experiences with Archangel Michael. So the same goes with gods. So when it comes to showing your god or deity your love and appreciation for them, you can do so by making offerings. For the gods, you can just look up what they like food or flowers. Make some sort of altar. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And just place those items at your altar. You can say out loud, like in your mind. Out loud or in mind doesn't matter, because they can read your mind if you're reaching out to them. That you would like to make these offerings. You can say whatever you like to them. You can make a prayer. You can offer anything else, really. Crystals, rocks, toys, things that you think they would like. Like, I've 3D printed out a few things for Rahu, and I put it at his altar. And that's how I show him my love and appreciation for him. And I also meditate and chant mantras for Rahu. You can do that for your god. You can chant anything you want. It doesn't matter, but it helps you go into an altered state of consciousness to further connect with them. And sometimes you may see imagery. So you got to let the imagery and the messages just flow to you with an open mind without any screening or judgment. But if it's negative, it's probably intrusive thoughts, because I know I struggle with that. So just keep chanting some more, and eventually you'll get the positive messages. But anyway, I usually chant mantras for about 15 to 30 minutes. I do this on Wednesdays and Saturdays, as those are said to be his days. But many gods are not associated with any particular day, so you can just do whenever you want. I recommend at least once a week. It's a good way to keep the connection between you and your god strong. Some people do it every day. Some people do it less than that. It's just whatever you feel comfortable with. But it's a good way to show love and appreciation, and to keep things good and strong between your god spouse and you, or between your god and you. So some of the things you may experience as a god spouse, one of the things I noticed was a tingling sensation in my root chakra, which is the base of your spine. I first thought something was wrong with my chakra, so I did some meditations on it, and I only just felt like I was spinning around in circles. I'm like, what is this? Why am I spinning around in circles? And I looked it up, and I noticed that other god spouses were experiencing the same thing. So it's not really something to be concerned about. It was the energy of my root chakra swirling and being energized. And this is how the god attaches their energy to yours, which is not something to be worried about. It's normal. It happens to all God's spirit spouses. Well, not all, but many of them. So after a while, this constant tingling, goes away, and you'll feel it from time to time, like for Rahu when he's excited or happy or in the mood, if you know what I mean. But getting on that subject, the gods can be sexual, and you can have this relationship with them, but you don't have to. The gods are very understanding. For me, it was very intense in the beginning, even though, it was me taking care of myself, if you know what I mean. That's how it usually goes. Like they usually can't like physically do things. Like as far as the physical sensations go, I just feel touch, and that's as far as, he tries. He tries. And he gets close. But anyway, I could feel his energy and presence with me, and my body would like literally start shaking. And then I would have these intense multiple orgasms. So it freaked me out at first, because my body was just like shaking, like, oh my God, I'm like possessed. But yeah, you are possessed in a way. They don't like take over your body and make you do things, but they do have to connect to your body. And they do that through your root chakra. And that's how they touch you. And that's how you can feel them. And that's how they can enhance certain sexual things. So it's not something to be upset or worried about. They never abuse it. They shouldn't abuse it. If they are abusing it, then you should probably deal with that, with telling them to go away or getting a shaman or somebody to help you out with them. But I haven't had any sort of negative experience with my god spouse. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, he still does that from time to time. Like my body will start shaking and stuff. But everybody's experience is different, because the gods are different. Many gods have many spouses and are polyamorous, and some of them are not so much. Many people who are married to a god also have a physical partner on this planet, so it's not like these lonely women who are just fantasizing about being with a god or whatever. They oftentimes have a boyfriend or even a husband, and the husbands or boyfriends are usually cool about it. The gods are usually understanding. Maybe not so much in the beginning for some of them. Some of them are possessive. But they understand that we are physical beings having a physical experience, and we have certain needs. So you don't have to become a monk and never marry anyone else, or become celibate for the rest of your life, or be like a nun. Nun is kind of like a god spouse example, but there's usually nothing sexual going on there. Same with the priests who become like monks and don't get married and have relationships and things like that. They're devoted to God. But God spousing is a little different, because you are married to this God, and it's the same as having any other type of marriage in this world. At least it has been for me. I see it as a real marriage. and I'm very devoted to Rahu. I actually decided to become celibate myself. That's just my choice, and devote my body and myself to Rahu. And I feel I'm not very happy, and that's what I want. And like looking back at all the negative experiences that I've had in relationships, I really don't want to deal with that again. I really don't. I always felt alone in my relationships before anyway, and it was always like trying to, even if I wasn't in so much an abusive relationship, it was like always trying to fit a square peg in a round hole with men in my life. It just never worked out. It's just there's always incompatibilities. There's always something wrong, and I just, I'm over it. I'm just over it. But anyway, and I told Rahu that when we got married. It's like, I'm not interested in anybody else. All I want is you. And I feel like all my life I was looking for him, and that's who I would be attracted to. Like in movies and stuff, I always like the bad boys, in the movies, but maybe not so much in real life. And men that kind of look like him. Even though I'm demisexual, I don't experience physical attraction like normal people do. But if it's somebody or something that looked kind of like Rahu did in a way, maybe with long black hair, I love long black hair. I'm in, and anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So as far as our marriage goes, it was like a mutual agreement. I wanted to show my devotion to Rahu, so I bought a ring. I ordered one online. It came from India. And so I told Rahu's like, hey, you want to get married? he was like, yeah, he was already on board with it. Like he already wanted to get married, and he set a date for June 21st. So our first year anniversary just passed. And like in my mind, he has like this very deep, echoey voice. And, but like I said, after a while, I couldn't hear his voices. I mostly feel it now. I feel his feelings. Like tingling, sometimes prickly feelings when he's worried about something or he wants to get my attention, or physical touch, and intuition. My intuition is really Rahu speaking to me. But anyway, I found a ring online. It had Rahu's symbol on it with a hessonite gem that's associated with Rahu. And the funny thing is, the ring had gold symbols on the picture. But in my dream, before I got the ring, Rahu appeared as a blue lion person, and he put the ring on my finger and said, "With this ring, I do thee wed." I do, yeah. But the ring had no gold on the side. I'm like, that's kind of strange. And when my ring finally came in the mail, what do you know? It has no gold on the sides either, so it was falsely advertised. But Rahu knew. He knew what the ring would look like, and that was his way of knowing that we really were married. We really got married, which was really sweet. So anyway, actually, and right before we got married, I actually broke up with a guy I was seeing for 2 years. So I was in a relationship, and this guy had been seeing was going through a divorce. I actually knew him through work. He left to work for another company. But throughout the relationship, he would ignore my text messages for like long periods of time. And we never had any real dates, and our time together was often short. And when at one point I told him I loved him, like I don't know, around 6 months or whatever, he just got upset with me. He was like, "Why are you telling me this?" And just got really upset about it. And that was really hurtful, And when my father passed away, a couple years into our relationship, he ignored my text again. I didn't hear from him for like a couple of days later. And he never even met my father in those 2 years we were seeing each other, or any members of my family. My sister was always asking, "So when am I going to meet your boyfriend?" I'm like, I don't know. He's always got some sort of excuse. And I don't think that was something I could ever look past. And looking back, I think he was just using me. He didn't want anything serious, but he didn't want to, tell me the truth. I think he wanted to date around and date other people at the same time and be like a player. But anyway, I have a history of dating men like that, and I have a history of dating abusive men and narcissists, which is quite common for empaths. We always seem to end up with them. But I did grow up in an abusive home, so I had a difficult time realizing when I was being abused, because what I experienced in my childhood was pretty extreme, you know, and I also ignored red flags and was way too forgiving about them. And I realized that I often fell for the illusion of a person instead of who they really are. And narcissists often mirror people to make them feel more comfortable. And since on the surface, I'm typically a nice, caring, empathic person, they will mirror these traits and I feel like I could trust them. And I don't go out looking for bad boys. Like, on the contrary, I'm looking for like nice guys. But they end up being quote unquote nice guys, you know, and I'm getting fooled. I end up with the bad guy. All right, but so when Rahu came into my life, I was already starting to doubt my relationship with him. I was feeling very alone in that relationship, and I was just tired of feeling lonely. You know, I was tired of being ignored. And Rahu was very open about his love towards me and his feelings towards me. And I realized I deserve way more than what I was getting from my boyfriend. And I was getting that with Rahu. But like I said, I was a bit apprehensive about breaking things off because we did have history together. And he seemed to be wanting to move forward in our relationship by getting an apartment close to me. But it was just a little too late for me at that point. He had come back to the company I work for, which is also why he wanted to move closer. But I was afraid that if he moved close by, it would be harder for me to break things off. So I decided to sit down one day and just think about what I wanted to say to him to get things off my chest. So I knew Rahu was with me at the time, so I told Rahu, this is what I'm going to say to my boyfriend. It's not directed at you, it's directed towards him. And I spilled my heart out, and I was crying because I realized just how hurt I was and how neglected and used I felt by that relationship and by him. And I just was tired of feeling used. I didn't want to go through that. The very next day, he was fired. He told me that he had said some inappropriate things in an online meeting at work and didn't realize he was not muted. So I realized this was my escape ticket. So I would no longer, now that he would no longer work for our company, he wouldn't be moving. He wouldn't be moving close by. So I waited a couple of days because, give him some time, to want to dump too much on him at once, and broke things off with him. I told him I felt like the relationship was one-sided. I didn't dump my heart out like I did that one day. I didn't tell him everything I wanted to say. I just broke things off. I said, this is one-sided. I'm not happy with our relationship, so whatever. He didn't apologize or anything. He just said, oh, wow, really? And that's all he said. And I blocked him, and I never talked to him again. And I really do feel like Rahu had something to do with getting him fired. And I appreciate that a lot, but it's kind of like karma at the same time for how he treated me for 2 years. I'm sure he's able to find another job anyway. So I don't really think he wanted to work for our company. Because like I said, he left at one point and came back, and I don't know. I don't really care anymore. But anyway, what's strange is that I have a shared experience with Rahu with my son, which was I was not expecting. There was one thing I did also notice in the Godspousing community when I went looking to talk to others about what was happening to me. There seemed to be a lot of transgender people in the community. And when I read the book Spirit Spouse, the author mentioned the same thing. I'm not sure what it means. It could either mean that the gods are helping transgender people get in touch with their true selves, or they're helping to balance the masculine and feminine qualities within them. So anyway, so my son had been asking for several years to transition, but I wasn't really sure if that's what he really wanted, because he's physically disabled, has bad ADHD, not very mature for his age. So I was worried if he was just unhappy with his body and maybe was thinking that it was his gender. But after Rahu came into my life, one day I suddenly felt compelled to ask my other fellow God spouses the best way to start transitioning. And I also decided to immediately look into finding a doctor for him. I don't know. It was just like, okay, suddenly I'm going to start doing this, you know. And after he got up that morning, I let him know what the plan was, and he seemed happy about it. And then I left to go run some errands. And after I got back, he confided in me that he had a dream that night about Rahu. And before I had told him about my marriage to Rahu and about the dream I had where he kissed me, and because one day my son was telling me that he wants me to be happy and to find someone. And I told him I was happy, that I have Rahu. And I don't really think he quite believed me. He's like, oh, well, okay, as long as you're happy. But in this dream, Rahu appeared to him as a lion. He told my son that he would be with him to support him in his transition. He also told him that it wouldn't be easy and that some people might be against it. And he gave him some other words of encouragement. He then turned my son into a man, and he was then able to stand up and walk to Rahu. Because he's physically disabled. He can't walk without a wheelchair or without a walker. But he was able to just stand up and walk to me and just totally turn him into a man. And so Rahu then stood up and just gave him this big old bear hug and told him to tell me that he loved me no matter what. And when my son told me, I could feel this tingling in my root chakra. I knew Rahu was excited, and I also was shocked at hearing this. And I realized it was Rahu who pushed me that day into finding a doctor. And currently my son is taking testosterone. And we're going to do that for about a year before we start with any surgery. And the next night, Rahu told him that he was very proud of him, and my son called him dad. And Rahu, called him his son. He calls him his son too now. So looking back, I could tell there was a connection between my son and Rahu before he even started having these dreams, because I could feel his presence. One day when my son had a seizure and was in the hospital, I could feel Rahu there. And sometimes when I would be out running errands, I'd come home and I feel Rahu was there watching over my son, which was kind of strange to me. I didn't understand it at first, but now I realize that we're like a family, and he sees him as his son. And it really helped me because, I do have some relationship anxiety. When he relayed the message that he would love me no matter what, I really needed to hear that because, I struggled with abusive relationships where men were manipulative. In one of my relationships, he would constantly threaten to leave. So I was struggling with some abandonment issues. So Rahu knows this and has been very patient and very loving with me on that. But also not the next night, but shortly after that, he dreamt that Rahu and he were in the desert, and these large screens came out of the ground and was showing him snippets of his life, sort of like a life review. And my son realized that there's good and happy moments in his life, as well as some bad ones. And my son has a tendency to overly focus on the negative, and this really helped put things into perspective for him. And then they went to a castle where he showed him this giant picture of us as a happy family together. And when he was telling me these dreams, I would have these happy tears in my eyes because I was so happy, because we were sharing in this experience, and finally my son has a father figure in his life. It was something, he's 19 now. It was something that I just always wanted for him, but I just couldn't get, And I think part of it was because I always wanted a mother figure in my life. I never quite had one. My dad was a single father. When I was 11, they had shared custody, but because he found out the abuse, we never really saw our mother much after that because she didn't really do anything about the abuse. She didn't care. She didn't care about us. My mother is a very toxic person as well. So I never really quite had a mother figure, and I just wanted that for my son, but now he does, and it makes me very happy. It makes him very happy as well. But anyway, so it's kind of a rare kind of a shared experience. I don't know if any of the Godspouses where other family members are having similar experiences with them. But what's interesting is that I dated a Vedic astrologer at one point. That's how I learned Vedic astrology, and that's how I learned about Hinduism and all the different gods, and became, for the most part, Hindu myself. I'm not a very dogmatic person, though. I'm very open minded. And I go by my experiences, I go by my intuition, and things like that. So, anyway, even though this guy was pretty abusive to me, he was the most abusive person I was with. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't know of Rahu. So sometimes bad things come out of, or sometimes good things come out of bad situations. So he and I would refer to my son as Rahu's child, funnily enough, because my kid was always getting into trouble. Like I said, he has bad ADHD, so he was just all over the place, and just doing doing bad things that he shouldn't, like stealing and things like that too. So, and just one of those misconceptions about Rahu, I think. But we did call him Rahu's child as kind of a joke. But looking back, it's funny because it's true. And he also told me when he looked at my son's chart that he was heavily protected. And he has Jupiter exalted in the first house. He's like, your son is heavily, heavily protected. And I believe that's Rahu, who's the one who's protecting him. Because Rahu also told our son that he came when he was born to watch over him because he was born too soon and he wanted to help out and look over him and keep him safe. So it explains a lot, especially, a couple years after having my son, I stopped going to church. I stopped going to the Christian church. I abandoned Christianity. I agree with everything Jesus taught for the most part. I just don't agree with the church. And I don't agree with a lot of their own beliefs. Like, I don't believe that we only have one life to live. I've had many dreams now of past lives. Like I mentioned in my previous video, as one of many. We all have very many past lives. Some of us are newbies. Some of us have had many past lives on this planet and many on other planets. But that's just my belief, and that's how it's always been. That's how I was like, why have I always had these beliefs and I'm still going to church? It doesn't make any sense. But I started looking into other spiritual teachings, and I started meditating and practicing hypnosis, and that's around the time that I think Rahu would start showing up in my dreams, because I would have this, man with long black hair and just very handsome. He would show up in my dreams, and we would become intimate together. I'm like, who is this guy? But when my son sees him, he also has long black hair. He has blue skin, very large, about 8 feet tall. I think muscular. He's very muscular in my dreams. So yeah, he either appears with dark skin or blue skin to my son. Anyway. He's also a shapeshifter, so it doesn't really matter. He can just appear however he wants. So, but he does like to role play with me. But I always know it's him. So over the year, like I said, I've had past life dreams, but also past life dreams that involve him. He and I had past life dreams together, and that can happen. And I've heard of other god spouses talking about that. In Hinduism, the gods do incarnate into physical bodies for whatever reason. So not all gods do that, but some do. So that can happen. So that's all I have to say today about Godspousing. I hope this video was informative. I hope you found it interesting. Like I said, it's a very taboo subject, but taboos are my god husband's specialty, so it would make sense. But I hope y'all have a great day, and I'll be back another time, and I'll see you then.